Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of Congregational Humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. I'm David Breeden, Senior Minister. Welcome. I've titled my talk today, Living into Interdependence, by which I mean that none of us is in actual fact independent. Human beings are socially and emotionally dependent creatures. The question I want to explore today is this: what if we think of self-creation as co-creation? Not because that thought is weird and out there in left field, but rather co-creation of self is how our reality works. So, why is it that in our culture, rugged individualism is so prized and praised when it's not the fact of our existence? Somehow, American culture sustains and encourages an individualistic self-concept, ignoring the complex web of relationships that in fact define our existence. As we know, loneliness is a major health concern in this country today. Let's consider understanding ourselves not merely as individuals, but as relational beings, deeply interconnected with the people and the world around us. I want to start in a bit of an odd place, though I hope it will make sense as we go along. As I see it, exploring relational being and living into interdependence begins with a very common human feeling, and that's awkwardness. Can a human being be awkward alone? You can remember awkwardness alone. A lot of us ruminate on that. But can you actually do something awkward alone? I don't mean remembering. Now, I also don't mean people who choose to stand out. If you want to wear a chicken suit, it's awkward, but go right ahead. We can feel happy and sad by ourselves. Those are basic emotions. But awkwardness, it's not exactly an emotion, is it? It's more of a, feeling? I don't know. I mean, really awkward. I know this is not a great picture, but these dolls say it all, I think. What are we feeling when we feel awkward? Now, awkwardness, I think, is social then. It happens when we say or do something that we suddenly realize is outside of social norms. We've misread some kind of social cue or acted in a way that lies outside the socially acceptable. We miss something. These are the situations that introverts, like me, attempt to avoid at all costs. My wife has to talk me into going places, right? Yet, and I'm talking about myself here, awkward situations are opportunities for growth. I mean, that's what I tell myself when I say, okay, I'll go. Awkwardness challenges us to practice empathy, improve our communication skills, and navigate the complexities of human relationships. By approaching these moments with a mindset of learning and connection, relationality, we can transform discomfort into learning and understanding both a little more about ourselves and more about others. The bottom line is that we don't want other people perceiving us in some way that we find objectionable or they find objectionable. It's about recognizing the value of every interaction as a piece of the puzzle that is our shared human experience together. It teaches us that growth, learning, and connection come from the most unexpected interactions and places, and that by embracing our interconnectedness, we open ourselves to a richer, more empathetic understanding of our own lives and of life itself. Awkward situations can tell us how our subjective thoughts can be wrong, or at least out of the norm in some situations. We can learn something. The feeling of awkwardness is telling us that we need to learn something. It's whispering. Which brings us to the question of how we acquire knowledge, the old nature and nurture question. An important theory which still affects European cultures and the many colonies that European nations colonized, like the United States, is the concept of the tabula rasa, the blank slate. That's the blank slate theory, which claims that the human mind is blank at birth and is written on by social circumstances, our upbringing, our education, our interactions. In this scenario, the human mind is written on during a person's lifetime, and at the end, I guess, we're suddenly products of our entire lives. Yay. In this scenario, as I discussed last week, the human mind needs a data dump. Dump all the data of information in for a JD, and you have a lawyer. Dump in all the information for an MD, and you have a physician. Dump in all the knowledge of a pastry cook, and you get a pastry cook. Now, this 19th century industrial model of education is the basis still for most education in the United States. It's the logic behind book burning. Ban books that contain ideas that are socially unacceptable, and by golly, the outcome will be good, clean, healthy, Christian, socially responsible adults. That's the theory. If you want your kids to be certain kinds of Christians, you put them into a certain kind of Christian school, or you educate them in your good Christian home, and they'll turn out good Christians. The only downside to this tabula rasa concept is it clearly isn't true. That's why we're working hard here at First Unitarian Society to change the way we do education. Nurture, yes, but nature is involved as well. Now, how did research finally discover this? The trolley problem. There are three basic scenarios and dozens of variations. In the slide, the choice is between killing one person, all right, over there, or what, 6 people. Which would you choose if you're the person at the switch? All right, that's one question to do. These problems have been given to people all over the world. Now, some people don't know what trolleys are, so you have to adapt them to different social circumstances. But the interesting thing about this, when you start doing it, is you discover, it has been discovered, that most human beings in our world make the same choices. So there's some kind of universal morality back there. Worldwide, most human beings see this as a clear choice. You would sacrifice one person to save the others. If you don't feel that way, that's okay. It's outside the norm, but most people in the world think this. All right, there's no right or wrong, and that's, as we'll get to, that's not the point of this. It is that most people choose particular ways of doing it, and then we want to say, why? Why do people all over the world do this? All right. In the second scenario, a trolley is hurtling down the switch, and you're on the tracks. What do? Do you shoot the person who's about to switch it, and therefore save yourself and kill 6 other people? Something to think about, right? So, kill one to save yourself or a number of people. As you know, this situation is now a reality with self-driving cars. They have to be programmed to make one of those decisions, and people are a little bit afraid to buy cars that will kill them in certain circumstances. In the third scenario, a patient comes into a hospital with a minor illness, let's say sore throat. As the physician is meeting with the ill patient, suddenly the doctor remembers that there are 5 people in the hospital dying in need of organ transplants. Does the physician kill the patient with a sore throat in order to save 5 people? Most people in the world say that would be morally wrong. It would be murder. Now, That's the trolley problem's point is, why do we think that? Why is killing one person in the first trolley scenario preferable to killing 5, when in this other scenario, we think it's murder if you kill 1 to save 5? Why is that? And remember, we're talking about people raised in all sorts of religions, all sorts of social situations all over the planet, and the majority agree with each other. Researchers keep questioning people, meet various explanations or excuses. Under such questioning and reasoning, most people eventually will say, I don't know. I just know it's wrong. Somehow, it is human intuition. You can even, if you're so inclined, buy the board game, Trial by Trolley, a party game of moral dilemmas and murder. In this situation, in the cover, we decide between killing 2 healthy elderly people and 1 kid with an annoying hat on. Which do you do? And also, you can buy the R-rated version. I have no idea what trolleys hit in this example, but you can get it if you really wish to. Where does this nearly universal set of moral beliefs come from? It's not from particular religions. People with any sort of religion and no sort of religion agree on the morality of the scenarios. It isn't culture either. People from all cultures, by and large, agree with each other. But where does this moral intuition that almost everybody has, where does it come from? Without knowing anything about the trolley problem, the 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant wrote this in 1788. 2 things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe. The more often and steadily we reflect upon them, the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. Now do notice that Kant is talking about the royal we and me, not everybody in the world, okay? But good German moralists would agree with him, right? They have a moral something in there somewhere. I do not seek or conjecture either of them as if they were veiled obscurities or extravagances beyond the horizon of my vision. I see them before me and connect them immediately with the consciousness of my existence. The consciousness of my existence. The fact that I know I'm alive tells me these moral intuitions. Now, in this context, Kant used the term transcendental, the structures of cognition that precede them and make possible the human experience of the world. That's actually what transcendentalism means. Most people don't know that. But the transcendentalists that we know, they had learned it from Germany. This is where the term transcendental does come from, and it still is where the actual transcendentalist would be. It's used to describe the way human beings imaginatively, creatively, intuitionally make decisions about what is moral and ethical in our world. That's more or less where the matter remained until the late 20th century. No one had a real answer to where this moral law within me, intuition, comes from. How does it get there? After the idea of natural selection, Darwin came along, generally known, we had some clues. Okay, evolution must be doing something about this. It's obviously not culture or religion. There has to be something in our evolutionary lives that have done this. Enter the British philosopher Philippa Foot. Most people haven't heard of her in this country, but she's one of my philosophy heroes. She died back in 2010. One thing she constantly insisted upon is that human thought must be as complex as reality. Now think of that a moment. It was a very bold thing to say. Our ethical decisions must be as complicated as the reality in which we live. In other words, God says doesn't work, right? Either or, black and white, doesn't work. The common answer, of course, when we ask people is, my religion says so. I'm a good churchgoer, therefore I believe this. But that's not adequate. And Philippa Foot realized that problem. Those answers are just simply not complex enough to reflect our world. And so Philippa created the trolley problem. And now that idea has spread around the planet And yeah, it's even a party game you can pick up. The starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. That moral law exists in the minds of almost everybody, and Philippa Foot decides to try to figure out how to get there. I will encourage anyone interested in philosophy and women's history to check out a recent book by Benjamin J.B. Lipscomb titled The Women Are Up to Something: How Elizabeth Anscombe, Philippa Foot, Mary Midgley, and Iris Murdoch Revolutionized Ethics. Now, it's pretty amazing that the first 4 women allowed into Oxford University changed philosophy forever. These women made up kind of awkward things around Oxford University when they were finally let in. You see Philippa there saying, you ask a philosopher a question, and after he or she has talked for a bit, you don't understand your question anymore. Here in the U.S., some people know the philosophical or novelistic writing of Iris Murdoch, the most colorful by far of the 4 philosophers, all of whom met as grad students at Oxford University during the Second World War, remembering that Great Britain was in the war a couple of years before the United States. As Murdoch wrote, and again, we are going to have women reflecting on these things, philosophy, empty thinking by ignorant, conceited men who think they can digest without eating. How do you really feel about that, Iris? Talk about awkward. They were making... Now, they were among the first women to do graduate work at Oxford University. They were allowed in because most of the young men and many of the professors were in the war, in a way. At that time, only one of the many colleges of Oxford, it's not like the U.S. where it's just one university, it's a whole bunch of colleges in the city. Only one school had a women's restroom at that time. And they're spread all over the city, right? So that was awkward. The prejudices of the time, which, as we unfortunately know still exist, the prejudices of the time had men asking why these women weren't married, taking care of a house, and having babies, like they should have been. Women couldn't think abstract thoughts. They couldn't do philosophy or science. All women do are talk about relationships, and they gossip all the time. The women used this prejudice, claiming that, yes, they were in fact closer to the real than were these guys who were getting fed and their rooms cleaned by other people. Yeah, we do understand a little more about reality, they were saying. We understand the real world better. Given the chance, these 4 women dominated philosophy for the rest of the 20th century in Great Britain. Elizabeth Anscombe, for example, became the literary executor of her teacher, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and she translated him into English. But he was her teacher, and she's still considered the authoritative translator of Wittgenstein into English. And yeah, she wrote such books as From Parmenides, one of the first philosophers, to Wittgenstein. That's how comprehensive her thinking was. Mary Midgley became the leading philosopher in the contemporary animal rights movement. Less well known in this country is her book, Refuting the Selfish Gene, by Richard Dawkins. In this book, Dawkins argued that genes are the actual drivers of human behavior. Given the beginning assumption of all 4 of these philosophers, that the basic instinct of humanity is relationality, Midgley refuted Dawkins in her book, The Solitary Self, Darwin and the Selfish Gene. She writes, the notable thing about Dawkins' story here is not its atheism, she was an atheist as well, but its fatalism. The drama that it presents as helpless humans enslaved by a callous fate figure is, of course, not new, and like all such myths, it conveys not just meaninglessness, but a positive, sinister meaning, the presence of an active oppressor. Are we oppressed by our own genes? She says, absolutely not. The Dawkins book, which appealed to the idea of the alpha male, became a bestseller in the United States. Midgley's book did not. She gets her revenge, however, because nowadays most European and American philosophers start from Midgley's assumptions, not those of Dawkins. Darwin's idea does not lead to the idea of an alpha male, but to relationality. We humans evolved as social creatures, and that must be the start for any consideration of ethics. Immanuel Kant and the male philosophers who followed him had in their hubris made a fundamental mistake, she claimed. We humans are not solitary selves. We are relational creatures. We are not like the lone wolves in the forests. We are like bees or ants, cooperating to survive. Our identity, our sense of self, our very essence is co-created through our intentions and interactions with others. We are inherently social creatures, and our development, well-being, and existence is intrinsically linked to engagement with other human beings. As Martin Luther King called it, we are in mutuality. A society that listens to the experience of everyone, women of all colors and ages, men of all colors and ages, non-binary people of all colors and ages, non-human animals. Even as Philippa Foot insisted, the society that listens and understands plants will eventually begin to understand our relationality with all things, and we will learn our ethics and freedom from those interactions. Our awkwardness is here to teach us that our first question must always be, what do all people, indeed all things in our existence, what do we all need to flourish and survive? That's the first question, she says. The women were up to something. They were attempting to teach us all that until we get it right with the relationality with all beings, until we get there, we have not achieved an ethical way of being human. Self-creation is co-creation. Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.